All right, and we will start off with Dan. I'm going to read Dan's bio, and then we'll turn it over to him. So, a creative at heart, Dan's professional joy comes through applying a spirit of innovation, original thought, and a builder mentality to everything he touches. His career primarily concentrated on brand marketing, and in his current role, he advises several large corporations on their sports and entertainment marketing investments. Prior to joining JPSE, he was responsible for creating and managing CDW's sports marketing and sponsorship strategy. Career highlights include the development of the Tech 4 charity program, the creation of innovation through sport content series, and the development of the sales-driven sponsorship method. Dan is a Northern Illinois University graduate. He lives in the greater Chicagoland area with his wife Alice and their two daughters, Audrey and Nora. As a decompression method, Dan previously wrote and performed stand-up comedy in his spare time. Unfortunately, he has become too successful professionally to allow any evidence of this prior nonsense to remain on the internet. Dan Frystak, welcome to Writing Professionally, Sports Writing.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate you all letting me join you today. That last bit is 100% true. You have no idea how hard it was to find and delete every other video of my, I don't want to call it past life, but let's just say less professional existence out there. But it looks like we have a pretty good group here and not going to be able to see a show of hands. But I did want to ask up front if anybody would be so brave as to respond. Who is most interested in this as a writer, and who's most interested in this as a sports enthusiast who maybe just happens to be good at writing and can see it as an application to what they do? I can wait all day.
Well, you're asking two things, Dan. You got to give like a yes, no to one of the two.
I want to hear some personal stories, and the reason why, maybe we'll talk about it later, is that I started my career, and I'll share my screen in just a second here. Like a lot of younger folks, not entirely sure what I wanted to do and exactly where I wanted to go. But what I discovered very early on in the process was that writing was something that I wanted to remain central to what I do. It's the kind of thing which may sound cliche, but it's true that writing's one of the few things that I do where I can put my head down, start working on it, and before I know it, it's 2 hours later, right? And it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel like I'm grinding through a budget or anything else. Now, having said that, in a career that Steve just referred to, working for a large corporate organization, working on the brand consultancy side, so helping other brands and advising them and doing so in a very, um, I try to be professional manner. It is much less about the things that I love to do all the time, and it's really about how can I apply the things that I love to do. So I will share my screen here and just kind of go through. I will apologize for the lack of images that I wanted to show up here because my team didn't get around to it fast enough. So but the most important part is the timeline, right? So if you look at 2007, graduating college, and what I was really doing at that time, um, frankly, I used writing as a tool to get by. So I realized that as being a less than diligent and dedicated student, and I say that with shame in my heart, not any braggadocio, I was able to, it's really where I discovered my love for it, right? It was the ability to craft messaging, craft language to make it seem like I was maybe doing a little bit better than I was. And I don't say that to a group of students as a recommendation. I say it as it was a survival tool for me. and something that I learned very quickly as I was going to become a professional and progress through a career. It was something that was going to stay a valuable tool for me along the way. So very quickly, though, how did it actually start applying to that world? I started on the agency side, and I thought I'd be cute here and write editing the wrong way, just so you can see how important these little things are as you go along the process. But um, the start of my career was on small agency work and working with groups that sold newspaper circulars and putting together the copy for those. So when you get annoyed on Tuesday mail day where you get nothing but ads for cheap computers at Best Buy. A big part of my job was helping write some of that and put it together, doing sort of the grinding work that a lot of us and a lot of you will do at the beginning of your careers. And while it seems like a grind, what it really did was help me understand how to be specific and begin writing in someone else's voice, right? So writing not just for joy, but for purpose and trying to achieve the goal that somebody had tied to my writing, which was ultimately to make money. Um, and that never goes away. So as I got a little bit deeper, I ended up working for a company called CDW, which is, if you're unfamiliar, a large technology company based in the northern suburbs, but all throughout the Chicagoland area, and they've expanded globally beyond that over the time that I was there. Now, when I started, it was a lot of executive communications and internal. And as I started getting into broader marketing there, broader brand marketing, that's where the sports really came in. And when I talk to people who are very interested in working in sports, I always say that it is very often nonlinear. So the writing has been a through line throughout. Sports is not. Sports was not something that I aimed to do. Sports was not something that I efforted towards. Some people do, and it can work to great success. And um, for me and for a lot of others, though, it ends up being a path that you less pursue and it more becomes available. And then you've built the stockpile of skills with which you can then go out and achieve your goals with it. And so when I was working at CDW in a still somewhat junior but advancing role in marketing and copy and all that good stuff, executive communications, they opened up a role that was focused on managing sports partnerships on the brand marketing side, and they wanted somebody with agency experience. They wanted somebody with brand marketing experience, and they wanted somebody with executive communications because they knew so much of the responsibility tied to a large investment on the external marketing side was tied to how do we make sure that our message is being conveyed through this investment, in this case with the PGA Tour, the NBA, and some of the other large sports platforms. Because when you watch a Bulls game, for example, your first thought is not, wow, how do I go buy a computer from CDW? Right? It is much more about obviously the experience. And so the job was really about connecting those two things. And that became a big focus of my career, was tying these things together and using language and uh, using messaging to make sure that it made sense for the people that we were trying to reach. Beyond that, we started getting a lot deeper, and I'll start going a little bit quicker here in the interest of time. But the remainder of my career at CDW became focused on that, but then also really cool things like working with Charles Barkley and creating brand marketing campaigns, working in conjunction with groups like Ogilvy and Mather, if you guys are familiar with some of the large PR and marketing firms out there, but using and leveraging sport to convey a message in different capacities. And so, trust me when I tell you, writing an ad program for the Chicago Cubs annual that goes out to season ticket holders is a lot different than helping craft messaging for a commercial ad campaign with Charles Barkley that's going to be seen during a Final Four broadcast. And so it really represented an elevation, and not just in the way you had to be sharp, but the way that you had to be specific in the stories that you would tell, because it was going to be in such a large megaphone. From there, I'll skip past the COVID part. It's a little boring, but moving on to what I do now, over the last 3.5 years is working on the consulting side. So advising brands that, working with a lot of people that serve in my former role at CDW, but now working with an HR firm, which working with a tequila brand, working with a recruiting firm, all sorts of different companies. And where writing has become ever more important there, I'll get into it in these next couple of slides. But where it's become so important is going back really to the beginning of what I talked about in my first couple of roles outside of college, which is making sure that I'm speaking in the voice of the folks that I intend to represent. And so doing so for Michael Jordan's tequila company when they're investing in an advertising buy with Golf Channel is much different than putting together speaking points for executives who are about to go interview PGA Tour Will Zalatoris at a large event on a Thursday afternoon, talking about his financial portfolio, right? So making sure that you can speak different languages and be able to effectively communicate within those, you have to put aside ego a little bit and you have to make sure that you're focusing on the skills that you've developed over time to make sure that you're accurately conveying what they need to get across. So I'll stop there for a second. I know that we're going to do Q&A at the end, but what I wanted to do here was then show you just a couple of examples of how this stuff comes to life, both in terms of how we use language to paint a picture and do so in some sort of the flashy marketing way, and then also how we need to be very specific from a true business execution perspective. Does that all make sense? Okay. So on this next slide, I wanted to show you an example of a group that we're working with called Hub International. For I think vast majority, if not all of you, are local. You may be familiar with this group, but they're a large insurance firm who's very interested in partnering with the Olympics in 2028. And that seems far away, and it is, but there's a lot that goes into how you would create a brand marketing program to be prepared to execute against that. And so in slide one, what I wanted to show you here is what I would describe as a careful crafting of a first slide. This is the first slide of a 40-page deck, right? That they would see, and you would we walk through and we presented, and you do all the fancy stuff tied to it. But two things are critically important when you're organizing these. One, you need to organize the slide in such a way that it's going to paint a picture with the words that you are putting in front of them. And while that sounds obvious or even a little cliche, pointing things out here, if it's going to be in LA, how do you make that connection between the Olympics, their brand, and it being in Los Angeles? How do you have a central theme that's going to be reinforced throughout? You have to set the tone up front. So you'll see references to gold medals. You'll see references to Tinseltown. We went through a process when crafting this where we referenced podiums and all sorts of goofy stuff, and you had to find that natural landing zone of how much is too much and how much is too cheesy, right? And so what we tried to do here was carefully grab them because we knew that as much as we were speaking to people and creating that one-to-one message when presenting it, once we send this deck off, we are no longer in control. So it doesn't matter what we say, it doesn't matter what we said. What they have in front of them are the black and white words on screen. And in a 40-page deck, if this gets handed off to the CEO, do you think he's going to read through that 40-page deck? I know David, and he is not going to. He's going to get through the first slide to maybe three, and we need to be able to use our language and our messaging to get the point across in a way that's going to resonate and make a difference. So I wanted to show this here, and that goes into a whole other thing. That one of the next couple of slides I mentioned, those first few being super important, is this next one around key considerations. And so this is not a beautiful slide. This is not a colorful language kind of a thing. But I wanted to point out here a few key elements. when you are going from, the flowery stuff here and the painting of the picture, you also very quickly have to pivot into what are we actually looking at here? What is the goal? What is the purpose? You see objectives, strategy, and concept. Everything that they're going to see hereafter is going to be built upon this. And important things to point out, we know very specifically through uh, data and science, not just our own gut feel, uh, assigning things and aligning in alphabetical order oftentimes is the easiest way for people to read and then understand and take it away and remember. So while some of these things may seem like you might want to organize the most important things at the top and then work your way down, uh, conversely, it's oftentimes best remembered when you work through alphabetical because we read left to right, top to bottom, right? So you'll see that here. We also try to, where possible, you'll see a couple of words put in quotes. We do that very specifically because we want people to understand that those are A, industry references, but B, they're important pieces that are specific to what we believe is our if not a very specific model, it's definitely something that we emphasize. So words like rifle shot, flow, and then wave that you see on the right-hand side, while those are, through context, probably easily understood, we like to put them in there so that people might see that it stands out and they go, oh, what do you actually mean by that? And then we can dig into it as you see if you saw the rest of the slides later on. So as much as this information looks like standard detail that you might see, we have outlined it and we have specifically authored it in a way that we want it to resonate and be remembered. Now, I did want to show you guys pretty quickly here. If you'll excuse me, it went away. This is not all the pretty stuff is pretty, but it's not everything that we do. So um, on the business side of writing, especially in the agency world, but certainly it's true no matter if you work for a team, a property, a league, a rights holder, whatever it is, everybody's trying to make money, right? And oftentimes it's about responding to RFPs. And if you don't know, that's a request for proposal, meaning people are saying, hey, we're interested in having support. How can you guys go about doing that? And while you get these RFPs, they're often multi-pages saying and asking a billion questions of how your agency or your group or whoever is going to best serve their needs. And they'll ask for 5, 6, 7, however many is appropriate for them. It's not so easy as just answering those questions. And what I wanted to show you here is not anything specific to each of these questions that have been answered, but rather I want you to see all of the back and forth. So me and my team will go through and we will very, very carefully craft little things throughout the way, right? Delete this, add this, emphasize here, et cetera, et cetera. And it's all very, very carefully written to respond directly, but in the way that we want them to read it. And so while some of it is basic editing, some of it is very much not. It's adding a comment. Do we have too many comments? Are they appropriate? Are we going Oxford comma this time? Or are we not? Right? So it's very, very detailed. And it's a process that leads to, again, you'll see the tiniest little things that I've added throughout the way to make sure that it's very specifically written in the voice that we'd like. Now, how does that actually manifest into the next step? So you answer the RFP, but then along with that, this is a very, very long and detailed breakdown of our agency capabilities, who we are, and what we do. And this is not written by an outside party. We are the outside party, right? We're the agency. We're the ones who have to tell our story. And so along with that very, very detailed and heavily written RFP response, we're sending over everything that we want to do to sell this organization on why we're the best ones and on and on. So when I talk about, slide after slide after slide after slide, these are all written out in painstaking detail and specificity. And as you'll see, very rigid in terms of staying true to a consistent approach and method. So This one, talking about Knights of Luxury, a case study, looks very much like the pop-up case study for a different sort of activation that we would have done. But the consistency in how we deliver it is such that it'll hopefully resonate and appear the way that we would like. So I think I'm over time and I will stop here. And then if you guys want, Steve, later maybe we could talk about some of the fun stuff that I do just to keep the brain sharp.
That sounds good. We could probably save that toward the end. For the folks that came in a little bit late, I'm putting that Google Sheets back in there in case you need to sign up if you're getting credit for your professors. Darcy saw that you had a question, but maybe if you could just make a note of it, we'll save that for after Andy's. We'll kind of have questions for Dan and Andy. And then Julio, yes, this is being recorded, and then it's going to be posted. Here, I can maybe grab the link for you there too. Um, we have a lecture series webpage, and it's going to be posted here probably in a couple of weeks once the college gets that up and running. So you could put that there and view Dan's documents in more details if you like. All right, we're gonna move over to Andy then. I'll read Andy's bio, then we'll take it away. So Andy Thurston joined Augustana as Assistant Director of Communications in August of 2023. In his short time with the Vikings, Andy has worked with numerously national ranked programs and conference championship teams. He has spearheaded the promotion for the baseball's program's first ever National Player of the Year and a pair of national runner-up individuals. Andy has developed and executed media relations and promotional plans for incoming head coaches and written feature stories to highlight athletic excellence within the university. He was also part of a communications staff that saw Augustana's largest year-long social media growth since 2019. Andy earned his bachelor's degree in sports management from North Dakota State University in 2020 and his master's degree in physical education from Southwest Minnesota State University in 2023. He currently resides in Sioux Falls, North Dakota. Andy Thurston, welcome to Writing Professionally.
Thank you for having me. I will do something a little different where I'm only gonna have pictures. So, as he said, my name is Andrew Thurston, Assistant Athletic Director for Communications. Um, Growing up, sports was always a part of my life. Anybody from Minnesota, you see that trophy, that's the only one you've seen in your lifetime. That's the WNBA championship trophy. The Lynx have won 4 times in my lifetime. Um, Big Wolves fan, Timberwolves and Twins fan growing up. I always knew I was going to work in sports. That led me to North Dakota State, where I was a baseball manager for 4.5 years and a intern in athletic communications for 2 years. Here was me signing. It was kind of cool. They had a signing day for us, so it was like we were kids signing to play at the schools when we signed to be interns. There was me as the baseball student manager and then working as a game operations intern. From there, I went to Southwest Minnesota State. I had my first ever headshot. They do get better. Um, I got to do a couple different things. Went with our softball team to different places like Florida and North Dakota, so two vastly different states, to work with them and cover their teams. There's a picture from our biggest basketball game is our tropical night at Southwest. So yeah, just in the field, it's a lot of stats, it's a lot of writing, it's a lot of media coverage. From there, I ended up at Augustana. It was a long process after I got my degree. Probably about 4 months without knowing anything next in terms of what I was gonna do afterwards. And then I got about 4 offers within a week of each other, and I kind of had to balance between do I want to go where I'm getting the most money? Do I want to go where I think is the best fit for me? I ended up choosing the best fit and the least amount of money, and it worked out for me. Um, there's a couple pictures. The top left was when the hockey arena, which I'm sitting in right now, was being built. We would go and tour a lot. Bottom left, I'm introducing our newest women's basketball head coach, and then me with our NSIC cross country title. Since I've been here, I've covered 5 NSIC championship teams. I've worked 3 different NCAA tournaments now. As Steven said, I've covered 2 national runner-up, and I've covered a National Player of the Year, the first in our baseball's program history. Um, in terms of writing, we kind of have 3 main articles that we go through. It starts with our press releases, so I have one up here. We currently recently lost our track and field cross country head coach after 25 seasons. Quickly named his successor afterwards. So as I go through here, we highlight his accomplishments. It was a really good exit for him. That's not always the case. Our stories look a little different for the tougher exits. I would show you those, but because this is recorded, I don't want it to come back up anywhere. We highlight everything he brought to Augustana when he was here. We included quotes from both him and our athletic director, his accomplishments while he was here, as well as the team's accomplishments. And then we go into the bio for our newest head coach. It's not always that way, like I said. With more surprising exits, we'll highlight the newer hire more than we'll hire the one leaving. They don't always happen right away either. Sometimes we have to wait a month or 2 to hire somebody, and then it's 2 different releases. Another main article we write is our previews. Most of our writing is for the media. So as you can see here in our game notes for our previews, we just highlight a lot of statistical stuff and just different tidbits that the media can use when they're calling the game. We have radio and television analysts here. So it's good for them to kind of essentially we do the research for them. It makes their job a lot easier. And it's just a bunch of different things that we kind of look at throughout the week when we're dissecting a matchup. Our football ones are a little easier to write because it's only 1 game a week, so it's a lot more time to focus on one team. When it gets to basketball and we have double headers, it's a lot tougher to do that, to do one team. And yeah, with Sioux Falls, they're our biggest rival, so we play for a key to the city. So kind of breaking down that rivalry since it had started, breaking down the other team, and then looking into our team. We had a lot of records broken this year. So that was stuff just to kind of keep in mind when we were writing our stuff so that the TV and radio analysts knew. The other focus is on recaps. We start here with our win over number 13 Minnesota State. With our recaps, we kind of focus on the reverse pyramid method. We put the biggest chunk and the most important stuff at the beginning, and then we work down from there. I always start with the biggest stuff, and then I'll go into play-by-play of the game after. So here we highlight our head coach becoming the winningest coach in our program's history. He started at Minnesota State, so I highlight that he started his coaching career there, his all-time record, and then just highlights from the game: passing leader, rushing leader, receiving leader, defensive leaders. And then from there, I go into just play-by-play, big plays that I noticed throughout the game while watching. I was also there, so it kind of helps get a feel for the environment while we're playing the games. A couple of things of advice that I thought about while putting this together. In this field, it's not easy to know what's next. It's not easy to kind of feel comfortable, I guess. There's a lot of stuff going on, especially in my profession. It's more than just the writing. It's statistical stuff. It is social media. It's graphics. It's working through RFPs to put our games on TV. Just different stuff like that makes it tough to kind of narrow in on the writing. For me, my first year as an intern, when I came in, one of the communications people that I worked under was retiring at the end of the year. So he didn't want to do anything, which made it great for me because I was able to do the recaps, just kind of do the stuff he didn't want to do. So I was able to learn on the fly from there. And then, yeah, I didn't take any college writing courses when I was a student. That's a big regret of mine because I've kind of narrowed myself into the sports path. Um, I wish I would have done different styles of writing, written about different topics just to kind of see what I liked, and I feel like it could have helped me evolve in my writing. I feel like I'm a little behind in my professional writing because of that. But yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is I've followed a path and written about what I know, and it's helped me grow as a writer because it's easier for me to do so. I hope that explained much. I was a little kind of all over the place there, but um, yeah, I guess if you guys have any questions, let me know. But that's all I got for you.
All right, thanks so much, Andy. So we'll turn it over to you all, students, if you have questions. I know that Darsh had a question, I think maybe for Dan, but if you want to ask a question, you could put up that like hand raise icon there, or if you just want to type it in the chat, I could read the question for you when we get to that. But kind of turn it over to you all. What questions do you have about writing, writing in sports, those experiences, and we'll take the conversation from there. I don't know if Darsh, if you wanted to lead us off with your question.
So, what was the main point of about this topic? What was the main point like about the sports?
Main point about the panel? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, the main point.
I don't know. I don't know if we've determined that yet. We're figuring out. I mean, I
It's like,
think
it's like if they have a career interest in sports.
yeah, I think we're right at the intersection of do you have an interest in sports or do you have an interest in writing or do you have both? And this particular lecture series is looking at writing in a professional way. And so we take like a different theme every semester. And this one is on sports. And then,
Yeah, but what was confusing me was that I like sports, but I don't play sports. That's what confused me in this one.
yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if Dan,
I would say, Darsh,
or,
I don't play sports either. I'm a 42-year-old man who would pull both hamstrings if I tried to get to the end of the sidewalk faster than a jog. So being a fan, I think, is always a helpful thing, and certainly my partner on the dais here mentioned always wanting to get involved with sports. I love sports. I didn't have a burning passion to get involved with it from a career perspective, but as the opportunity presented itself, I will say one of the great things about it is it creates um, a level of excitement in your day to day that look, we're all working. It seems like many of us, most of us, are writers, either at heart or in skill, maybe or hopefully both. Doing so to help write ad copy for a Charles Barkley commercial, or writing game recaps, or any number of opportunities tied to the sports world. If you have interest in it, it's a really fun and interesting way to apply your skills to getting that paycheck every 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I think I would second that too. I think for me at least, the goal was always to find something that didn't feel like a job, to feel like I was working without the just feeling like I had to work. And this path felt comfortable. It felt like it was for me. Um, Another thing too is, I mean, I don't play sports either. I would watch games and I would think, wow, that was a really important part of the game. And it might have been uh, a lob pass in the third quarter that got intercepted, and the Timberwolves went in transition and scored on that play, and I feel like that changed the game. And I might read an AP article afterwards that doesn't even mention it. For me, I liked those like just little plays like that throughout a game that I could highlight in my own writing. That kind of I thought changed the game.
all right, we got a couple questions in the chat, and then Vikram, I'll go to you after that. So the first, and maybe Andy, this might be for you. How could someone get involved with newspaper sports writing, either as a career or submitting guest articles?
I think it starts with just reaching out to people. Just emailing local people is the best. For me, it was we had an intern program at my undergraduate, so that helped a ton. But yeah, I think you have to start getting to know people. If it maybe you might have to write on your own. I know a lot of people start with their own blog and then they send that off to newspapers and stuff like that just to kind of get seen and get that experience on their own. Um, so yeah, that would be my suggestion would kind of be writing on your own and reaching out to people.
I think that's great. Just kind of a quick plug for the freshman writing program. As part of the program, we have you create a professional portfolio of your writing, and students of our in the past have done the writing that they want to do and then have it in their portfolio. So then when you go on your job market, you not only say, here's my degree or here's my thing, but like here's the actual writing. So I think Andy's right on. Like that's great advice. Start writing the thing you want to do and show them that you could do it. This is maybe a question for both Andy and Dan. So, what would you say is the most overlooked and or underappreciated aspect of your career? And then Vikram will go to you.
I can jump in quickly and just say that I do think that there's a perception that because it's sports, perhaps it's easier. And it's you're not writing a book on tax accounting, right? So maybe there's this impression that it's requires less discipline or focus, effort, all those good things. And realistically, I always say that it's a little bit harder. I think as a result of it being the kind of thing that people love, right? People want to read about. People are seeking this out, and so there's typically a higher level of criticism, a higher level of fan or viewer knowledge in the information that you're putting out there. So you can't really BS your way through it. Remember, I talked about using writing as a tool to BS my way through maybe difficult classes or, frankly, even difficult jobs starting out. Um, it doesn't fly, right? That's why you have to truly develop those skills. So maybe you don't start as far behind as I did, because very quickly you end up um, getting in front of an audience who knows what they're talking about, and typically you're speaking to something that they're passionate about. And there's a responsibility to that, and there's also just a higher barrier of entry for what success looks like.
Yeah, and I think for me, this might not help you guys a ton, but for me, it's the extra stuff. I can give you an example. Yesterday, we had baseball at home, and I was doing stats, writing my recap, doing social media, and capturing replays for the umpires if any play was replayed. Um, if my story doesn't go out within an hour, 15 minutes after the game, people are wondering where my article is or where my breakdown of the game is. Um, so I think just the extra stuff I think goes is really overlooked and then underappreciated too because with stats it's like that's my job. You just get it right. And there's some people in our conference that are bad and then I have to clean up their messes, and our coaches ask me questions, and it's dealing with that stuff. Um, so I think just being able to be or to excel in your profession is probably the most underappreciated part because people just expect that you are good at it.
Great. Vikram.
Hi, yes. So, hi, my name is Vikram, and yeah, I think this overall presentation, sorry, it was good. But the only question that I had is that um, so right now actually I'm majoring in business management. So if I were to major in business, so how would I um like in the management perspective, if we think about business writing, so how would I like how it's related to writing, like business writing.
Uh, Andy, I can start here if you want to jump in at any point, feel free, obviously. But as I said earlier, my path was nonlinear.
Hello?
And ultimately, I think the most critical thing that you can do is build the skill set that continually makes you uh, a valuable but also differentiated candidate. So obviously, if you want to effort very specifically toward one job or job function, that's one thing. But if you just say, hey, I have a business acumen, I want to be on the business side of sport. If that's the case, then hone your writing skills in whatever job you're pursuing coming out of school. Hone and certainly hone them now. But some of the most valued people, and this goes beyond writing, but some of the most valuable people working in the sports world today are ones who are really, really great at data analytics. They're really, really great at writing. They're really, really great at social media manipulation and leveraging of new media in general, right? Things that have nothing necessarily to do with sports. That's just the currency of the realm, right? So they're applying the things that they're experts at to a world that is going to find it increasingly valuable because every business, it's still a business and they need it. So I would encourage you to keep refining the skills that you're working toward right now. Lean into the ones that you maybe have a preternatural talent for, like writing potentially, so that as you pursue those opportunities, what you don't want to do, and what I tell people who come to interview with me for roles on my team, starting out talking about how much they love sports, I could care less, right? I shouldn't say we all do, but many, many, many people do. Millions around the world, right? That does not help me at all get done what I need to get done.
Yeah,
Okay, and
I would second that. And even, I mean, when I was taking sport management, our program was more focused on the marketing aspect and the sport law aspect. So we didn't have a sport writing course even in our major. So I mean, just having any writing experience beforehand, you're going to be able to write well on topics that you enjoy writing about. So being able to just get those reps in with writing, just in general, is going to help you a ton in sports writing if that's what you're interested in.
All right, we'll go over
yeah,
to Basilica.
Hi,
um,
everyone. My question is, I have two questions actually. One of them would be, how frequently do you guys work with women in sports writing? Do you see them often, or maybe it's something that doesn't come by too often? And a second one would be, how relatable is the show Everybody Loves Raymond to your guys' lifestyle? Raymond was a sports writer, and he oftentimes would watch TV and watch sports, and Deborah would be cleaning and cooking and doing all the mess. So, as a sports writer, especially if you're married, how do you, I guess, tell your wife you're working while you're watching sports? I didn't understand the complexity of it, the communications, the marketing, the analyzing, the statistics. I really just thought everybody would just watch sports and then write like Raymond did. So I guess I would say, how relatable is that show in terms of how they explain sports writers and your real life?
So I'm not married. So I have plenty of time on my hands to take care of all that stuff. We have somebody on our staff that's um, a female in communications. It is rare in the communications field because it's a lot of just the nerdy statistical kind of just the stereotypical things that men get into. So I think it's evolved since I've started 4 years ago, but there still is a way to go. Otherwise, we work really closely with our marketing department, which is two females right now, and our compliance director, who's also a female. So in sports as a whole, we are surrounded by females in the workplace, just not as much in the communications realm yet.
And I would just add that, and again, Andy's application is much more direct to the question of sports writing, but I would say the business of sport broadly that I was speaking to in the the field with which I have spent my career, your perspective is at my age is going to be greater than mine is now. And the reason for that is it has been a world dominated by men for a long, long time. And we work with brands that sponsor Chelsea Football Club women's, work with Sloane Stevens, the female tennis player. And when we seek to create content and stories and write things about what's happening and connect marketing message with that, with those partnerships, I don't have as much perspective. I could not possibly have as much perspective on how to connect those two things as you would, right? And where we can continue to broaden, I think that that is absolutely not just the direction that people want to go and brands want to pursue, but it's just going to make everybody a little bit smarter and more informed, right? As those perspectives are more directly engaged.
And it isn't as much college writing, but I would do some research on Jalen Hurts. He has a all female team around him between PR, marketing, communications, that aspect. I would look into him and kind of just see how his team works and then go out from there. I think that'd probably be the best. Um, Otherwise, our profession is a lot of just grumpy old men essentially. It's a lot of people that have been around for a long time. Um, it is trending in the right direction. It's just not there yet because I don't think women saw themselves in that profession as much because of who was in place. It is evolving. It's just not where it should be yet.
And maybe just to add to that a little bit more, there's a need for it. I mean, the explosion of women's sports right now is massive, with women's soccer, women's basketball. There's now women's hockey league. So there's just a need for it, and this is just like the right time to make that evolution happen. Malwina, and then I'll go to Rachel here in the chat after that. Or Malwina, are you there? If you come back, we'll let you answer your question, but I'll go over to Rachel then in the chat, which is a couple questions. One, when interviewing athletes about the game or about their athletic careers, what types of questions are good to ask them? And then when writing about sports with a lot of play action, how do you pare down the information in a recap or story?
Can you repeat the second question? Sorry.
Yeah, it's when you're writing about sports with a lot of action, how do you pare down the information in a recap or story? I think that's maybe just like a bigger writing question about I just watched a 3 hour game. How do I now write that in 500 words?
I use back and forth a ton. Just if it is a game where it's a 10-minute stretch, the score is still a 3-point game, which is where it was 10 minutes ago. I like to highlight runs a lot, especially in basketball. I think that's the most common part of it. With football, you can kind of break down drives and break down just key plays in each drive. Even if it is back and forth, there's still those little things from within scoring drives that you can break or you can see. Otherwise, basketball's the toughest one for that one, and that's just highlighting as many runs as you can and who's scoring on those runs and stuff like that. And then the first question was like bad memory. I can't remember the first
Yeah,
question.
this first question, and I don't know, Dan, if you've experienced this maybe just with your work with athletes, but when interviewing athletes about the game or about their athletic careers, what types of questions are good to ask them?
I always lean into uh, personality and areas of interest. So they've all asked a million, or they've all answered a million questions about, their sort of standard, what happened, how'd you get into this, or whatever, right? But in the age of social media, it's very easy to see what they're interested in, why, how long, different things that they're doing. And I also think that if you're providing content that is slightly different than what the, typical reading might be on any given day, I'd much rather hear about Sloane Stevens and what sports she played in college and why she chose to pursue tennis. But like that's a great starting point. But okay, what sport did she play? Why did she quit that one? And how does she still engage with it for fun on the weekends? Does she play with her sister? Blah blah blah. Like, how can you lean into the personality and maybe just take a different angle on something so that you're not just providing rote content? Because regardless of who you're writing for, unless it's like, ESPN or one of the big dogs in the room, you have to remember in a fractured media world, nobody's going to be pursuing your specific content, right? So you need to be able to provide something that might break through and be a little bit more interesting than the next guy.
Yeah, and I kind of get to cheat too when I'm writing feature stories on somebody. I'm with them when they're getting interviewed by like news stations. So I hear the questions that they get to hear every time. So I get to put my own personal touch on it. Specifically, I did a story on we had 3 guys in NFL training camps this past fall. So when I was writing that, I kind of asked all 3 of them just the 2 basic, how's training camp going? What are you kind of looking to improve? And then we had a quarterback with the Chargers, so I asked about his relationship with Jim Harbaugh, who's kind of known as the quarterback whisperer. I kind of took that route with him, or with a fullback for the Vikings, CJ Ham. He's in his 10th year, just asking about, and he's a 3-time captain now, just asking about how his leadership has evolved in the 3 years that he's been there. We had an offensive lineman with the Rams, so just asking him about the success in the building before he got there. And then the offensive line coach had a ton of individual success as a player. So just asking about what he's taken from that coach specifically, or what he's learned from leaders on that line that have been around for a Super Bowl and whatever else. So yeah, I get a head start just because I hear the questions from everybody else. But I try to do everything I can to make it about them and just their own personal individualities, I guess.
Malina, I see that you're back. Is
Yeah.
your mic working? Oh, it is.
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
Go ahead.
Sorry. So I wanted to expand on that question about women. Do you think the content that would be created by women would be directed to female readers, or is it completely different? If the man writes it, it's easily digestible for men, and our perspective would be completely different. And if the man was to read our article, it wouldn't be as interesting. And my second question is, how much competition do you get from the internet content creators? Because people tend to lean towards watching rather than reading. And do you feel that competition? And do you implement internet into your work?
I could.
Go ahead. Yeah,
Oh,
please.
I can start with this one. I think that's why our profession has evolved into more of the social media and the creative content side of it. I still love sitting down and writing what I just watched. That's just me. In terms of curating our stories, for me, it's tougher. I think in terms of our fan base as a whole, they're gonna read about what they're interested in. So I think we're gonna have more women reading about our acrobatics and tumbling team than they are about our baseball team. I don't know if that changes as much depending on who's writing. I guess I'm just not 100% sure on that. But for us, I think it's just more what you're interested in terms of the sport that we're writing about.
Yeah, and I would also just add that female writers, the more perspective, the better. And across sports, broadly, and this is, outside of what I do day to day, but, maybe the most prominent NFL talking head and writer on ESPN right now is Mina Kimes. And, more perspective is better. And we talked about this earlier, that it's been guys who look like me and Andy for a long time doing these things. And while there's nothing wrong with that, it's certainly short of what's fully right. And frankly, it doesn't take anything away by adding additional perspective. So, and I think you're seeing that with the evolution of it, as well as what Steve mentioned. I'm sorry, Professor already mentioned, as well, around women's sports becoming, a bigger and bigger piece of the cultural landscape. Right? It's irrefutably true that WNBA outranks men's college basketball, a lot of PGA Tour golf right now in terms of viewership, and that comes across the board when you see the breakdown of gender and beyond.
Yeah, people are tired of hearing backup quarterbacks and bench players talking about sports.
That's
This
great.
is the time.
So we got one last question, but I know we're kind of like a little bit over time, but it's in the chat, and I think it's a good one just because I think all of us as writers and students experience this all the time. I think it is that like writer's block type questions. So do you still encounter challenges in identifying the starting point when it comes to your writing process?
I could just say quickly that all the time is the answer. And I think that two important pieces from that. One, I think it's a good thing. I think that means that I want to challenge myself and not just write the same thing over and over again, or some version of the same thing. So I look at that as not getting bored and not getting redundant. So maybe that's a little, glass half full, but I do view it that way. And then the second piece of it, where I've always found strength in how to kind of start again, is I always just try to think of the most interesting thing that I'm going to get to. So whether I'm putting together slides or if I have to put together some massive, Q&A outline, right? Whatever it is, I'll focus on the parts that are most interesting to me, and whether that's beginning, middle, or end, because as I do it, you're creating an inner monologue. At least when I write, I am. And by doing so, no matter where I start, if it's right in the middle, inherent to that, I start thinking about, okay, well, what would more naturally come before that, right? Or what comes after that? And then I can start creating my narrative no matter where I start, because I think of it as a conversation, or I think of it as talking to somebody, or I think of it as two people talking. And I know eventually I'll figure out how I got to that point of most interesting and how I'm going to move away from it.
Yeah, it's probably tougher for me to get challenges in the starting point just because I'm writing about something that happened in front of me. I think that's, like I mentioned about just basketball games that kind of get stagnant or something. It is tougher to find those different things to write about. And even in press releases, we're not always going to hire the most successful person in the world, or the person leaving isn't going to be the most successful coach in the world. There definitely are challenges in those, and it's kind of just using your creativity to put a positive spin on things. That's another thing. Even in our profession, we were writing for newspapers, so it's mentioning the best player on both teams and mentioning what the other team did really well, and even your own team if they're not doing stuff well. It's now evolved to where people are reading our stuff for our own programs. So I've done a lot more of just focusing on the positives of our own stuff, and some games aren't always going to have positives. We might shoot 13% from three, and we might only score 15 points and a half. Like, it's not always going to be the easiest. So just trying to find as much positive as you can throughout.
Well, thanks so much, everyone, for coming. I'm just going to put that link to the sign-up sheet one last time. I know that both Dan and Andy are on LinkedIn. If you wanted to link up with them, they're happy to answer any more questions outside of this time. And for your friends that weren't able to make it, this will be posted in a couple weeks. But thanks so much for coming. If you got any questions for me, you can find me. And got any questions about the program, I'm happy to answer them. But thank you again, Dan and Andy, and thank you all for coming.